The morning after my brother's wedding, I opened my banking app the way I always do, just a reflex, standing at the hotel sink with toothpaste still on my brush. The balance said $847. I stood there so long the screen locked itself. My house fund, $31,000. 4 years of double shifts, skipped vacations, packing lunch every single day at a job where everyone else went out. Gone. And the only people who knew that account existed were my mother, my sister, and me. I put the toothbrush down. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just got very, very still. The way you get when some part of your brain already knew this was coming and is not even a little surprised. Let me back up. I'm a forensic accountant. I find fraud for a living. I spend my days following money through shell companies, dummy invoices, intercompany loans that smell wrong. I am not a person who gets conned easily. That's what made it so humiliating. That's what kept me quiet about it for 3 weeks before I did what I eventually did. My name is Ivy. I'm 28. I live in Columbus, Ohio, in a one-bedroom apartment that I have been trying to leave for 2 years. The plan was simple: save $35,000, put 10% down on something modest in Clintonville, stop paying rent to someone else. I was at $31,400, 3 months out from the number I needed. My family is not simple. My mother, I'll just call her my mother, has always run the household like she's the CFO of a corporation where everyone else is a low-level employee. She tracks things. Who owes what? Who got more at Christmas? Who she helped more when they were starting out? She keeps a ledger in her head and she references it at Thanksgiving, and she does not let things go. My sister Becca is 34. She has 2 kids, a husband named Doug who has been between opportunities for going on 16 months, and a lifestyle that has never quite matched their income. I love her. I also know exactly who she is. The wedding was my brother's, my younger brother Cam, marrying a woman named Jess who I genuinely like. It was held in Cincinnati at a venue that cost more than my down payment. Not my business. It was a beautiful day. I was a bridesmaid. I wore sage green and smiled until my face ached and danced to September at 10 p.m. and meant every bit of it. The night before the wedding, I made a mistake. My mother called me to her hotel room to help with something on her laptop, a gift card she was trying to print for Cam and Jess. I sat on the edge of her bed and opened the browser and logged into my email to find the Visa gift card confirmation because she'd accidentally sent the receipt to me when she purchased it. I found the email. I printed it. I closed the tab. I did not clear the browser history. I did not log out of my email. I didn't think about it. Why would I? It was my mother's hotel room. I was there for 4 minutes. The wedding happened. It was lovely. We cried, we drank, we danced. My aunt caught the bouquet and acted embarrassed in the most charming way. I drove back to Columbus the next morning, and that's when I saw the balance. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed. I'd kept my room 1 extra night, and I opened the transaction history. 6 transfers, all initiated the night before, after midnight. 3 to an account I didn't recognize. 2 listed as family support, the memo field my mother uses when she sends money to Becca. 1 to a Venmo account I also didn't recognize but would later trace to Doug. $23,000 to strangers I'd never authorized. $8,000 directly to my sister's household. $31,000. My entire house fund. I put my phone face down on the bed. Here is something they don't tell you about being betrayed by family. The first thing you feel isn't rage. It's grief. A specific grief. Like finding out a version of your life you'd believed in was never real. I sat in that hotel room for maybe 20 minutes just feeling the weight of it. The vacations I hadn't taken. The dinners I'd said no to. The dress I'd put back on the rack at Nordstrom Rack because I was being responsible. Then I picked the phone back up. I called my mother. She answered on the second ring, cheerful, asking if I made it home okay. I said, "Can you tell me where the money went?" Silence. Not long. Maybe 2 seconds. But I'm trained to notice the pauses. She said she didn't know what I was talking about. I read her the transaction IDs. I told her the amounts. I told her the timestamps. 12:14 a.m., 12:31 a.m., 12:58 a.m., 1:27 a.m., 1:22 a.m., 1:22 a.m., 1:46 a.m. 6 transfers while I was asleep 2 floors above her. Another pause. Then, Ivy, you have more than enough. You've always had more than enough. You've always had more than enough. Becca is struggling and you sit on all that money and you don't even offer. I wrote it down, word for word, in the notes app while she was still talking. You sit on all that money and you don't even offer. $31,000, 4 years, and that was the explanation. I said, okay, and hung up. I called my sister. She picked up laughing. She'd been texting me a reel, and when I told her what happened, she went quiet. Then she said something I was not expecting. She said she didn't know. Not the way people say they didn't know when they clearly did. She sounded shaky. She put me on hold and I could hear her in the background, and then she came back and said, I got a transfer last night. Mom told me she'd talk to you about it. She said you'd agreed. I believed her. I still believe her. I know the difference between my sister lying and my sister finding out she's been used as a justification for something she didn't know was happening. She cried. I told her I had to go. I sat with all of it for 3 weeks. I kept going to work. I kept filing reports, tracing transactions, writing up my findings on other people's frauds. At night, I came home and I opened my laptop and I did what I do professionally. I followed the money. The 3 accounts I didn't recognize, one belonged to a home repair payment platform my mother had been using. The others traced back to a cousin I barely know who'd been asking for money on Facebook. I documented everything. The routing numbers, the timestamps, the IP addresses on the transfers, all initiated from a device that matched the browser session I'd left open. Here is the thing about forensic accounting. The paper trail is always there. People think deleting an app covers their tracks. It does not. At the end of week 3, I had a folder with 47 pages of documentation. I did not call my mother. I called a lawyer. She was a woman my colleague had used in a property dispute. Sharp, direct, didn't over-explain things. I sat across from her in a downtown Columbus office and I laid out the folder and she went through it page by page without saying anything. Then she said, "This is wire fraud. This is also a civil matter, unauthorized account access, conversion of funds. You have a very clean case." I asked her what my options were. She said I could file civilly and recover the funds plus damages. She said I could also report it criminally, which would complicate things but wasn't off the table. She said it was my call, and she said it the way people say it when they mean choose carefully because you can't undo it. I went home and thought about it for 2 more days. On the second night, my mother called. She'd been sending texts I hadn't answered, first asking if I was okay, then explaining, then justifying, then getting shorter and shorter. The call was brief. She said she needed me to not make this a whole thing. She said families help each other. She said I was being cold. I let her finish. Then I said, I want the money returned within 30 days. All of it. If it's not returned, I'm going to let the process handle it. She laughed. Not a mean laugh, more like an exhausted one. Like she found me dramatic. Like this was me overreacting to something ordinary. IV. It's family money. I hung up. The 30 days passed. I received a Venmo payment for $200 from my sister's account. She'd sent it herself, I think as an apology, though we never talked about it directly. I received nothing from my mother. On day 31, I authorized my lawyer to file. What happened next unfolded over about 4 months, and I'm going to tell you the shape of it without going into every detail because some of it is still legally sensitive. My mother's attorney, she hired one, argued that I had implicitly given access by not logging out. That argument went nowhere. Unauthorized access to financial accounts is not excused by browser carelessness, and my lawyer made that very plain. The civil case moved forward. The funds my mother had transferred to her cousin's contact and the home repair platform were harder to recover than the funds that went to Becca's household. Becca cooperated fully. She turned over everything she had, which was most of the $8,000 she'd received. Doug was less cooperative. We had to go through a separate process for that portion, and I won't pretend it was clean or easy. My mother, in the middle of all of this, sent me a card. A greeting card. The kind with flowers on it. Inside, she had written that she hoped someday I would understand that she did what she did out of love, that a mother only wants her children to be okay, that she hoped I would find it in my heart to come back to the family before I lost it entirely. I read it. I put it in the folder with the 47 pages. At the 4-month mark, the civil judgment came through in my favor. Total recovery, $29,400, not the full 31 because of some of the external transfers, but close, plus court costs, plus a formal finding of unauthorized financial access that went into the public record. No criminal charges. That was my choice. I had enough documentation to have pushed harder, and I chose not to. I have thought about that choice every week since, and I still think it was right, though some days I'm less sure than others. The day the transfer hit my account, I sat at my kitchen table and I didn't do anything dramatic. I made coffee. I looked at the balance for a while. I thought about the 4 years it had taken. I bought the house in Clintonville 6 weeks later, closed on a Wednesday. The inspector found some minor issues with the gutters and a cracked tile in the basement bathroom, and I negotiated $1,200 off the asking price. It needed paint in 2 of the rooms. I painted it myself over a long weekend in November. My best friend Arden came and helped. We listened to a true crime podcast and ate Thai food, and by Sunday night, the living room was the color of warm sand, and it was mine. My relationship with my mother is not repaired. I don't think it's going to be what it was, what I thought it was. We have spoken twice since the judgment, both times briefly, both times at the edges of something that was never quite said. I don't know if that will change. My sister and I talk. It's different now, quieter, more careful. She apologized in a real way, not a performing way, which I respected. She's going through her own reckoning about what she knew and didn't know, and what she should have pushed back on years ago. I'm not in a position to rush that for her. Becca told me something a few months ago that I keep turning over. She said that when she got that transfer, she had assumed I'd offered because I always seemed fine, that I seemed like someone for whom $30,000 wasn't a sacrifice, that I'd always had a plan and always landed okay, and so it didn't occur to her that it would matter. I thought about that for a long time. I'm not angry at Becca. I'm a little sad, the way you get sad when you realize you spent years looking capable and forgot to let anyone see the cost of it. I am an open book now, not as a performance, not to guilt anyone or prove a point, just because I'm done managing how I appear to people who have been given no reason to see me clearly. The house is good. The gutters are fixed. I repainted the front door a dark green that the neighbors keep complimenting. I found a farmer's market 2 blocks away, and I go most Saturdays. My cat, whose name is Ptolemy, has cleaned the window seat in the living room and appears deeply satisfied with the arrangement. I learned things from this that I already knew professionally and somehow hadn't applied to my own life. That proximity doesn't equal trustworthiness. That love, when it's used as a justification for taking something that isn't offered, isn't really love, it's leverage. That the people who tell you you're being cold for wanting accountability are usually the ones most afraid of it. I also learned something about myself, that when I'm truly hurt, I go quiet. I go analytical, I build the folder, I talk to the lawyer. And somewhere inside that process, there's a grief I haven't always let myself sit with, because sitting with it meant admitting that something I needed to believe in wasn't real. The $31,000 came back. Most of it. The house is real. I live there now. The other thing, the belief that my family would not do this to me, that one I'm still accounting for, that ledger isn't closed. But I am here, in my house with a green door, and the morning light comes through the kitchen window at an angle that makes everything look like it's worth something. That is enough. For now, that is exactly enough. And to anyone watching who has been told that protecting what you built is selfish, that needing accountability makes you cold, that family loyalty means absorbing whatever someone takes from you, you are allowed to protect your life. You built it. Every boring, careful dollar of it. Don't let anyone make you apologize for that. I used to think the hardest part of what happened was the money. $31,000, 4 years of packed lunches and skipped trips and putting things back on the rack. That's what I told myself at first, that what hurt was the number. But sitting in my house now, the one with the green door and Ptolemy in the window, I know that wasn't it. The money came back. Most of it. What took longer to account for was the belief I'd been carrying that the people who raised me would not look at what I'd built and decide it was theirs to take. That belief didn't survive. And I've had to decide what to do with the wreckage of it. Here's what I've come to. The actions my mother took had a cost. Not because I made it costly, not because the court made it costly, but because that's simply how things work. When you take something that isn't offered, you don't just take the thing. You take the trust that made access possible in the first place. You take the version of the relationship where the other person comes to you openly. You can't spend what you drain, not really, because what you've drained is the source. My sister Becca told me she assumed I'd offered the money because I always seemed fine. That's the part I sit with most. I spent years looking like someone for whom sacrifices didn't register, and I never corrected that impression. There's something in that worth owning. Not blame. I didn't cause what happened, but I had built a version of myself that was so composed, so quietly capable, that the people closest to me had stopped seeing the cost of anything I did. That's not entirely someone else's failure. Maturity, I think, is doing the hard thing when no one is watching, but it's also being honest about what the hard thing costs you. I wasn't. I kept the ledger private and then felt unseen by people I'd never let see it. That's something I'm still working on. What I did. Documenting everything, calling the lawyer, following the process instead of the emotion, that wasn't coldness. People called it that. My mother called it that. But there's a difference between being cold and being clear. I was clear. I knew what had happened. I knew what I needed to do, and I did it without cruelty and without chaos. That took more out of me than it probably looked like from the outside. The resilience that got me through it wasn't some dramatic strength. It was smaller than that. It was making coffee the morning after the transfer cleared. It was going to work on a Tuesday and tracing someone else's numbers while my own were still in dispute. It was painting the living room warm sand on a Sunday in November and letting that be enough for one weekend. You build a life the same way you lose one, incrementally, decision by decision, until one day you look up and realize where you are. I'm in my house. The light comes through the kitchen window every morning at an angle that makes me glad I stayed the course. That's not luck. That's the accumulation of every boring, careful, unglamorous choice I made when no one was paying attention. That's the only kind of foundation that holds.